and welcome to Imagine Talks podcast, achieving success, social impact, overcoming obstacles. And my name is Francis Kong.
And I'm Stephen Chan. Today we have Samantha Mui. Samantha Mui is a native of the California Bay Area, and she is a former culinary student and current food blogger. She has worked in the restaurant industry for over a decade. Her cooking style is inspired by her travels abroad, where she has experienced culture through cuisine. Samantha has been a guest on PBS's Check Please. Find her on social media at Sammy Eats. And I'm pleased to say Samantha has also published her new book, Melting Pot, available in bookstores and Amazon, Stories and Recipes from a Chinese American Daydreamer. Welcome, Sam.
Hello. Thank you, Stephen and Francis, for having me. I'm super excited for our chat today.
So this has been exciting to see your growth. We've known each other for years, and you just published this book, and we were just wondering, how do you get your inspiration?
Oh gosh, that's such a loaded question, right? I think specifically for this book, I can talk about Melting Pot, where I get my inspiration, but for me, I've always been really in touch with what I like to call my inner child. Mm-hmm. Every inspiration that I have as an adult comes from, the stuff that I dreamt about when I was a kid. To give you an example, when I was a kid, I was this odd kid. I didn't watch cartoons that much. I really enjoyed watching cooking shows. And, in some ways, for me, watching cooking shows gave me a glimpse to people's lifestyles and how people were so different in the world. And so I really got a lot of inspiration through, just watching TV. And as a kid, I dreamt, I would go to so this is the thing about me. I had a mouth on me, but as a kid, I was also very shy. So nobody really knew this about me, right? So I would go to field trips and come home and start talking like a tour guide, and I would imitate everything they were saying. So I would do the exact same thing when I watched a cooking show. I would go home, talk about food and all these different things, and watch these television shows and imitate it. So that's kind of where I got my first let me try to actually cook. And it was from that I got a lot of inspiration of how to cook, and largely why I decided to start cooking was actually had to do with the fact that I never fitted in with my peers in elementary school. To me, I felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb, which I didn't realize now looking back on it. I was Asian American. I was given these opportunities that were afforded to me, not necessarily because I was supposed to have these opportunities, but I just somehow happened to be in certain places. And because of that, I felt like I would never fit in, whether it's, my school systems, different friends, all these different things. I was just so different and out of my element.
Yeah, so, you mentioned that in your some of those elements in your book, how you're merging two different worlds. And what were those two worlds that you were merging and trying to reconcile?
Yeah, and so, it's funny, it's I've always dealt with a lot of conflict growing up. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize this. I was, obviously I was Asian American, but at home I was this type of, I was Samantha, or, the daughter, and so I always knew what to do to be that specific person for everybody. And then, I had, family that was so closely connected to their Asian Chinese roots. But then when I go to school, it was such a different culture. I didn't have much social norms growing up. I was a latchkey kid. My mom let me run wild when I was a younger kid. So I learned, I was just not trained like most kids to be a certain way. So I had a lot of freedom. And I think that's largely now how I am as a person. I am very free to do what I want to do. I am, I learned how to thrive off this creativity that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten if I didn't have the child upbringing that I had.
And some of those influences come up in a lot of what you talk about in your books, food philosophy too.
Mhm.
You talk about how food connects people. You talk
Mhm.
about mastering cooking techniques, but not recipes.
Yep.
Tell us a bit about some of your food philosophy, then how being sort of I would say free
Yeah.
in a way as a latchkey kid, as you say, influences how you cook food.
Right. So much of my life growing up, I didn't have structure. I didn't know what that looked like. I learned a lot of different things on TV. And I feel like as a young kid, I had a lot of adult experiences in a young kid's body.
Yeah.
So when I say that, when I talk about mastering, techniques and not memorizing recipes, it's because like I never really followed recipes growing up. And this is because I watch a lot of the women in my life. And in Melting Pot, you'll see that there's a lot of stories dedicated to chapters to women that really have shaped me as a person. And so um, a lot of the women I've seen cook, they never followed the recipes. They follow this intuition in the kitchen. They knew what they were looking for and they just had this like formula in their head and they would produce the exact same, they would produce all these amazing foods. So it was funny. And this is kind of, we're talking about like, my Western context and the Asian context that I grew up in. That was very interesting to me to see that, even in the kitchen we cook differently, right? I mean, I'm sure, I don't know about your mom or grandma or whatever, I don't know if they use measuring cups, right? That's not a thing. It was just intuition and it was guided by this. Yeah.
In one of the food philosophies, I definitely resonated with one of the food philosophies that you had. One of them was called "Be Resourceful," and and if I just could read out loud one of the parts of your book, you wrote, "In my childhood kitchen, each tool had many functions. A cleaver could be a fish knife, meat cutter, and garlic press all in one. Watching my grandma," and this is what I definitely identify with, "watching my grandma save all the packets of barbecue sauce and ketchup at fast food joints taught me that each bit counts." And then you later write, "Having limitations can be a launching pad for creativity." And I can imagine that there's a lot of emotion that can get wrapped up in seeing that happen with your family. On one hand, there's a lot of like you could potentially frame it as something that's sad, or
Mhm.
but something that can also be celebrated, meaning that there's a lot of resourcefulness there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you,
Yeah.
do you feel like there are any particular cooking stories, any things that you've had to overcome in your own cooking journey?
Ooh, that's really good. It's crazy because I feel like, and I think I need to give you a little backstory of like how Melting Pot even came about because
Yeah, tell us.
yeah, because I think it'll actually kind of answer a little bit of that. But I originally, so when I was a kid, two things I loved. One was storytelling and one was food. That was like my two things as a kid growing up. Those were my favorite things. And I remember, maybe in elementary school when I really felt like I wasn't fitting in, I was bullied and things like that. I read Chicken Soup for the Soul, the series by Jack Canfield. And there was just something really powerful about those books where it was about human experiences, stories about people who were really going through tough situations, going through pain or struggles, but being able to see the other side of everything that, they always knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And for me, as a young kid, I grabbed onto those truths and I held it like it was my little like safety blanket. And so when I got older, I always saw myself, doing something, maybe even a cookbook one day. But I realized like I really wanted to tell stories and tell stories from an Asian American perspective because when I was a kid, I read a bunch of picture books about food, all these different things, but I never really read about my experience. And I thought that was really important because as an Asian American girl, I had a lot of conflict and tension within myself that if I was able to kind of share that perspective, in that mindset, how old I was at the time, I do believe that this could help somebody else who's coming of age and trying to like figure out who they are as a person. And so I knew people aren't going to really read my story because who is this chick, you know? Like, so I decided I'm going to incorporate stories and food together. And I realized at a young age that food is connected with all memories, whether it's good and bad. And so to me, it just made sense. So combining the two was really the inspiration behind it. Ooh. Oh, you're mute. Sorry.
So, thank you so much. I muted myself because I was hitting some buttons and I didn't want the audience to hear that. But you were mentioning stories about and wrapping them up with your cooking. Throughout your book, you also discuss how things have been like growing up for you. How you mentioned Judy Blume, that you might have been a Judy Blume heroine, and also the original food stars, Lydia Bastianich, Martha Stewart, Nigella Lawson, and but you didn't exactly see people with a similar background as you growing up. And so that's reading through this has been valuable, because I don't think too many Asian Americans see themselves when it comes to like the usual cooking stars.
Yeah.
Do you feel, and so take us through your journey then. You're growing up, you've wanted to be a storyteller, and which you are now, a storyteller and a chef, which you are as well. I mean, you have experience in terms of making food, and Francis and I, and Francis had let me know that you've also learned a lot on journeys abroad. You mentioned that briefly in your book too, but tell us a bit about that and what kind of things you've learned abroad.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy because before going, so I went to abroad in 2015 to live in China for 1 year. But before that, I was convinced I would never leave California. I thought that, California is the thing. I always want to be here. I never want to move. I didn't even have an urge to travel one bit. Okay. My first flight was when I was 18, and I think I went to Kansas City, Missouri. So like, it's just to give you some context. But yes, right after I got out of college, actually a month before I graduated from college, I had this opportunity to live abroad in China and get my grad degree and do my research and studies and everything in 1 year and teach. So to me, I was just like, yeah, why not get a degree, go have fun, try something different. And part of me, I couldn't explain at the time, but I knew there was like a certain pull for me to do that. And that's the thing, like, whether I'm using my intuition in the kitchen, I use it a lot in my actual life. And I just knew that there was some reason I needed to be there. So anyways, I just took the leap. I realized, in order to go anywhere in the world, all you need is like 2 suitcases and you could be anywhere, right? That's one thing it taught me about life is like, you can like, I wasn't as attached to my things as I thought I was, right? When you go with 2 suitcases, you come back with 2 suitcases and that's it, So that was a really cool, small little side note lesson. But yeah, I went there and I, in my book, how we were talking about being resourceful and all those different things. For me, like watching it in action, because it's like my motherland, my mom's from Guangzhou, China, and my dad's from Hong Kong. So my mom, so realizing what I can, like seeing it with my eyes every single day, people cooking on the streets, people having a little cart and making 5 different items. I remember this is like a very vivid, like it was like this thing that, just really blew my mind. It was one day I was walking down the street and I see this gentleman with a bike carrying like 3 couches on this little wagon.
Wow.
And yeah, one guy on one bike carrying that many things. Like, it was like this light bulb in my head that came out. Like it told me, like, you come from this line of thinking, like where you come out with these crazy ideas because you're limited. And that really gave me this new idea. Like, because I always thought, people say you need this in order to get this done, or you need this. And that's very similar how my cookbook got started too, is like I just had this idea and I was like, you know what, how do I make this happen? I didn't have a single publishing deal, but I knew a book is just consists of images and writing. And so that same, like that aha moment, walking on the street, making me realize like how I can do anything, also kind of carries on to like how I went on and making a cookbook and such.
That is remarkable. And it shows you how practical that can be in terms of, well, you don't have to necessarily be perfectionistic about how you carry three sofas,
No,
right? So
yeah.
so it sounds like that also was helpful in terms of inspiring you to create this cookbook then.
Mhm.
And are there and so tell us, how long did it take for you to write your book?
Oh gosh. So the backstory is, okay, I actually, so this is funny. This has to do with Imagine Talks, because as soon as I spoke Imagine Talks, right? This was my first talk ever. I've never done that. And I didn't realize how hard it was. So I had all
Mhm.
these running themes, right? And it all had to do with food and my life, food and life, and all those different things. So then I was like, oh my gosh, like these could be made into stories, like little short stories. So I started this Google Doc and started writing all these stories down. And I was like, but a lot of these have to do with recipes. So I started doing that together. And I kid you not, like right when I started doing it, like a few pages in, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a cookbook. And I knew in my head that I was like, I'm going to make a cookbook now. And I also knew that I was like, well, one, how am I going to do it? Like, I don't have any background. I don't have a single publishing deal. And I know, like, if I pitched it to someone, they probably wouldn't give it to me. So I was like, I'm going to find a way how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to tell the story that I want to tell. And I'm going to find people that believe in what I'm trying to do. And they're going to come alongside with me. And we're going to do this together. And so I started writing it for a year, kind of took a break, went traveling for a little bit. And then I had asked, I had known somebody who is actually a designer and was leaving a lot of corporate jobs and as a designer by trade. And at that point we had this really great synergy going. And so all those beautiful photos that you see, all those beautiful writings, the photos, the design, yeah, largely.
Yeah.
Well, that one is actually my uncle did that, because that was when I
Oh,
first started my own cookbook. I needed photos, and I have my
yeah.
uncle who's like, he does it for fun. So this goes out to show how scrappy I was with all this, like how, we did this in the beginning. It was the original that I designed was nothing like what you see now. But it just goes to show, like, I just really believed that this could happen. And I connect to my inner child and realize this is such a small little task, even though people are saying like a big book is such a big task. It's like, no, it's just images and text. And if I can get those things right, I know that this can be something. So that's all that's kind of where that all happened.
That's no easy task. The way that you lay out the book has been beautiful. Stories, photographs, imagery, as well as the recipes. Tell us then, you also mentioned Imagine Talks earlier. And for those who don't know what you spoke about for Imagine Talks, tell us a bit about how you ended up landing a keynote speech, a speech at Imagine Talks, and what your talk was about.
Yeah, I mean, Francis, who was here earlier, who
Mhm.
I adore so much, he's my mentor. Um, Actually, we had many conversations about food and all these different things, and he made that connection that food was actually connected to all my growth in life. Like there was a strong connection there. And once we realized that, he was like, you should do Imagine Talks. This would be perfect to talk about both. And so originally my title, and originally this is my title, my book was called Memoirs of a Culinary Dropout, because I am a culinary dropout. I never finished culinary school, but you know, that was kind of, I wanted to give that like twist about it, because I didn't want to just, you know, talk about, you know, ways that I was thriving. I really wanted to talk about, and most of my story was talking about like how food was closely connected to every theme in my life, how food was this thing that like helped me get through a lot, you know, because it was in the kitchen where I found how to actually deal with my emotions. And you're, you know, you're a psychologist, and you know, in one of my chapters, it's, you know, I talk about how for a long time I didn't know how to deal with my feelings, but it was cooking that helped me figure that out, because there's a meditative process that goes on when you're cooking. There's a start, middle, and ending to everything. So no matter what you're going through, when you're cooking, you'll always see the start, middle, and end. And you realize that even if you're going through a really tough time, there's always a redemptive thing about cooking. Like even if I made start, middle, end, and the food doesn't look good, I still have the next day to make it better. And that type of perspective, as I was like, you know, cooking and, you know, getting lost in my own thoughts and everything, and that actually helped me a lot. And, you know, I credit a lot of it being in the kitchen.
I can imagine that a lot of folks who are growing up in certainly the same conditions where they're having to figure out their way in life, figure out whether they should join one world or both worlds or two. You know, we were talking about growing up as an Asian, but in an American culture, and you know, there's certainly like you know, you don't have to be perfectionistic about it. And you mentioned having a game plan. As long as you have some sort of plan, you can go along with the journey, go along with the flow, and enjoy yourself along the way too. So with that being said, you know, before I forget, actually, you mentioned speaking at Imagine Talks, and I remember seeing you on stage, and I remember I was there. I enjoyed your food platter afterwards. It was one of the most delicious platters. It was so intricate. There were just lots of ingredients, so well presented in this beautiful platter. Tell us about that. How did you come up with such an amazing dish?
Yes. So first of all, when we decided we're gonna do like some kind of food case, I was like, oh yeah, I could do charcuterie.
Yeah.
But then I was like, I'm just not gonna give everybody, because you know the thing is, I had been working in and out of the food industry for a long time, and there's a lot of things that people don't realize in the back end of like there's certain things that you can do to really like take it up a notch with your charcuterie. And I was like, I'm going to showcase that type of stuff that I do on a daily basis, how I really wow. And, you know, I really want to bring it back a little bit just to the cookbook, because a lot of the ways that I cook in the recipes, I don't know if you took a look, they're very simple. I basically shortcut, or I, you know, dumbed down everything that I know and made it easy for everybody to make it. And so, you know, I give you tricks, hacks, tips, all those different things that I've learned. Like I've learned the structure and I basically dismantled it and made it easier. And so that's what I wanted to showcase with the charcuterie. Like I try to take all these items that I knew that people would just throw on a board, and I just try to make it look really nice. And you know, obviously I feel like it was something that, you know, stuck on as an impression, but really like I'm on top of just being, you know, cooking, you know, I am an artist, and that's how I kind of, because it was, I remember it being very like, you know, pretty, and, you know, it was huge. It was a huge platter. And so it was casing, you know, I did it live so that people can see how easy it was. And actually, funny fact is, you know, since the pandemic has happened, I've transitioned a lot of these things like charcuterie building into courses, and, you know, being able to show people how to do it on your, you know, at home and make it look have that finesse that you get at a restaurant is something that I've been very passionate about doing.
So courses, do you mean meal courses or online courses?
Oh, sorry. Yes, online courses. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Tell us about that. This is fascinating. You're always up to something new. So tell us, what are your online courses, or where can people find them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, well, one, I never expected to, do this in this timing, but originally it started with my book launch. I would, cold email a lot of these bookstores to book, have my book. And this was right at the pandemic, like when I was, contacting these people. And I was like, hey, how are you going to get connected with your book, the people who, so connected with your bookstore, but they can't come. So I was like offering to do these free cooking classes. And so what that did was, obviously, you message a lot of these bookstores, and, when the pandemic was happening, I didn't get a lot of responses back, but the one or two that did, would do these courses for them. And so I developed these courses in a short period of time, and I just did it with their viewers, did it for free, and just be like, just to promote my book. And then it was actually, so I started posting about these things, and people who worked in different like companies and things like that, they started reaching out and was like, hey, we
Oh.
have happy hours, would you want to do this and that? So that just like took me off to another place where I was starting to do all these like random events and teaching all these different courses. So originally it started with like one course doing the charcuterie, and I really expanded to like 5 different classes at this moment. So I have a lot of, and it continuously, people are just looking through my book now and be like, hey, want to do that one, can you make it happen? And so so I've been really just pivoting in not just doing book sales. Now I've really started doing courses, and I really enjoy doing that. And because one, as I love entertaining, and two, I love showing people entertaining should be fun, easy, and it should fit your lifestyle.
That is so exciting. You've launched and pivoted. We call it pivoted, meaning like you're changing your direction in life. You took us through a journey from your past and how you grew up,
Mhm.
all the things that happened to what you've witnessed in China.
Mhm.
Then the book, your Imagine Talks Talk, and now you're teaching others about how to cook. And I'm just curious, what else is gonna else do you have in store for you in the future? Do you have any plans or other ideas on where you want to go now that you've got your book and your courses out?
Yeah, I mean, personally, like, the thing is, I never, and this is where I get so stumped I don't know about you, Stephen. I don't know if you operate on those like 5-year plans for yourself, but
Yeah, I myself have like a 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, and then just as you said, a few years out sort of plans. 5 years out is pretty what at the maximum. What about yours?
well, see, this is the thing. Every time someone asks me about 5-year plans, I'm like, oh, I don't have one. And I can't lie about it, because truthfully, I just lean into the things that I know that's going to get me closer to what I think I want. And that's what happened, whether it was the book, it was, even getting connected with Mag was, doing the pageant, leaning into
Wait,
that,
Mag? Oh, tell us about
Mag.
that. For those who don't
Oh,
know, who are on the audience, okay, Mag,
sorry.
tell us what Mag is.
Yeah, MAG is short for Miss Asian Global, and it is a pageant that takes place in San Francisco every single year. And I was fortunate enough to participate in 2017 and landing Miss Congeniality. But I would say, like, yeah, I just leaned into that because part of me was like, I want to continuously put myself in situations that make me uncomfortable, make me feel like I'm like feeling crazy and crappy inside, and like all these different feelings and tensions that are running high, but being able to like keep myself at a really good, like a peace level, I guess. So I just did that, and I leaned in on that, and then that got me to Imagine Talk, getting connected with Imagine Talks and doing all these different things. And Imagine Talk was a launching pad for me to think that melting pot was this idea. And so I just continuously just lean into that. But what I was trying to say was, I don't have a 5-year plan. I just have these things where I'm always joke, I never know what the next year looks like for me, because every year looks different, but I always feel like I'm getting closer to what I think I want, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's an excellent example of the concept of serendipity, taking advantage of opportunities that are presented
Yeah.
and change. And you mentioned leaning in
Yeah.
when those present opportunities do come up.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered so much ground, Sam. I wanted to just say how much I'm grateful for you to come on to our show. I was wondering if you had any last words of wisdom or things that you'd like our viewers to take away from our conversation.
Yes, absolutely. You know, for me, as I'm looking back, 'cause my 30th birthday is actually next week.
Oh,
So,
wonderful. Okay.
I mean, no, not next year, sorry, but next year. I'm so sorry.
Next year.
I don't know where I got the week. I can't keep up with this
You know,
calendar anymore.
the difficulty about birthdays is that you don't remember the year. It changes each
You
year.
know
So
what? Exactly. Like every time I turn, like, let's just say I turn 29, I still think I'm in that 28 mindset. So anyways, but I am turning 30 in March. And one thing I realized was, like, I was talking to a girlfriend of mine, was like, in my 20s, I legit was so tough on myself. Like I would, because the stuff that I knew I wanted to do, I didn't see people doing it, and I didn't see people that look like me doing it. And so so I would cry at night wishing that I could be somebody else. I wish I could be an engineer. I wish I had that heart set that I was like, I want to be a doctor, and that's all I ever wanted to do. I didn't have that. And that's and the stuff that I wanted to do was so not like your typical jobs that, people would say go for. So it was really frustrating and then not only that, knowing that I wasn't anywhere close to what I wanted to be. That was another thing too. So I was like, feeling like I was not, not at the place that I needed to be to do these things. And two, like trying to figure out, like, are my dreams too big? That was another thing. And so when I look back on it, I'm like, now that I'm about to turn 30 and, got to have all these really cool experiences. I think of these as experiences. And I'm just like, sometimes you just got to trust yourself, whatever it is. Just trust that, there is a process and there is a path that, if you just stick by it. Because there were so many times I walked out of the path. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore because this is too much. And I'm not getting the recognition, or I'm not getting any of that stuff that I feel like I need to, or people need to see in order for me to be in the next place. But I've realized, like, like if you've got something burning in your heart and that fire that's light up in yourself, I'm going to tell you, you're not going to get any peace at it until you actually do that one thing. And so for me, like, looking back on it, I'm just like, you just really have to follow that fire that's inside of you, because you will end up in this. Okay, sorry. Don't mean to go.
Yeah, go for it. This is
like, sorry, this just popped in my mind.
Yeah.
I think this was like 5-6 years ago. I got this quote that was so life-changing for me. It was this quote that said, like, or a meme that said, like, there are people who climb up at this wall and realize once they get to the top that they were on the wrong wall. And that was like, whoa. And it really started making me question about why I do the things that I do. And knowing that, like, has given me peace about the things I do, because I don't always do the things that I feel like people get it, why I'm doing the things I'm doing. In fact, I was talking on another podcast the other day. I was saying, like, the last 10 years, I've just been working random jobs, trying to, like, collect skills that I knew were going to help me to do these specific projects I wanted to do one day. And so but nobody understood it but myself. And so sometimes when you're trying to chase after something that's lighting you up, people aren't going to get it. And, find the people that do get it and constantly surround yourself with those people. Because I couldn't be more grateful for those people that have helped me to get here, because I did not have, and I always say, even in my book, I think towards the end of my book, I do an acknowledgement page, and I said, there were people who dreamt for me when I couldn't dream for myself. And that was really important for me, because people, even in my early 20s, when I was nothing, and I still don't think I'm like anything. It's just like I've been able to do these really cool things, but before I was, doing on any of these things, somebody saw that I could do these things and started talking to me as if I were already doing those things. And so I was like, oh my goodness, like, someone believes in me. And that was super important. So, always, find someone who dream for you when you can't dream for yourself. And that makes a host of difference for, whatever path you're going on.
What a strong message, and what a wonderful message to convey to people in terms, how you can be successful in your own way, and surround yourself with people who are very supportive of you, even when you don't believe in, or even when you're feeling low. They'll pick you up, and that's what a lot of true friends will do too. I gotta say, I know we're gonna be out of time. Where can people learn more about you on social media again?
Yes, so you can either find me on Instagram at Sammy Eats, NMY, not MMIE. Or you can go on my blog. I think it is samtillymui at wordpress.com. Let me just double check on that.
Sounds good. Oh, I'll say a few things while you're checking. So that's again at SAMMYEATS. That's Sammy Eats on Instagram. And Imagine Talks again is on imaginetalks.org. The Imagine Talks podcast is achieving success, social impact, and overcoming obstacles. It's produced by Francis Kong at Edge Interns. So we can find out more about Francis Kong at www.edgeinterns.com, and myself, Stephen Chan, at Mental Power Hacks, where you can learn more about success, life, and productivity. Tammy Tran unfortunately couldn't be here, but she's one of our co-hosts. I want to wish Tammy Tran all the best to her and her family during this crazy year. And were you able to find that website?
Sam? Oh, yes. Sorry. Let me quickly that for you. Yep, it's exactly what I said, samtillymui.wordpress.com.
That sounds exciting. Thanks all for joining us this episode. It was so wonderful to learn about Sam, and Samantha Mui is her full name. Google her and find out more about her food and her books, upcoming books. We hope you all learned something too. Tune in next time for another episode. Take care for now.